Hello, everyone. Welcome to our guests, Harry and Lily, for our FriDAI brunch number 3. This is a very special edition because we will deal with a new topic, which is UX and design in the Web3 space, and in particular in DeFi. So, as usual, we will start with the first section of this panel, with this interview, by presenting our guests, by letting our guests present themselves with some icebreaker questions. So I will go ahead. Please, guys, present yourself in the first place, your name and your role. Harry, please.
Yes, hey, welcome everyone. I'm Henry. I'm head of the design team at the Maker Foundation. I've been working there for about 2.5 years now. So it's been quite the journey seeing the space kind of really take off and evolve. And before when I joined, DeFi wasn't even a thing. So yeah, it's quite remarkable to see where we were then and where we were today.
And I'm Lily. I'm a designer in the space. Currently, I'm working for as a freelance, Pull Together and Status.
Nice. So the first question for you guys to get to know you a bit more is how and why did you decide to join this space, the blockchain space, in the first place? So we start with Harry.
Yes. So I was working in kind of fintech for like 5 or 10 years as a designer in London, and really like the chance to work in crypto and blockchain. I was working on a project before Maker to do with Lloyd's of London, and they were considering moving like significant portions of commercial insurance paper. It sounds really boring, but literally trillions of dollars onto a blockchain to save themselves tons of money, overhead, and be more efficient. And I sort of had this realization moment when I saw a bunch of the other big companies start to address blockchain really seriously, that like there's a significant chance that this period becomes the most exciting time to work in finance for like almost maybe ever, definitely in our lifetimes. So the chance to work in this space and contribute what I can to kind of help move this space forward, I mean, I couldn't really say no. So that's why I'm here.
Cool. And for me, actually, it's almost by accident. So me and my former co-founders, we pivoted into this space from my last startup, building an onboarding application for HR. And so I guess the more interesting question would be why I stayed, right? It's also because I would say 2 points. Like first, my background, apart from design, I studied law, and I focus on cybersecurity law and online privacy rights. So basically, the core principle of blockchain is aligned with my personal principle or research principle in a way. And the second is kind of like the feeling that we're building things with purpose, and kind of goes beyond the money and fame and so on and so forth. So yeah. Oops, Maria, I think you muted yourself.
Yeah, I was. So next question is this. Thanks for your presentation. Yeah, your story is very interesting. So is there anything or anyone, since I think about designers like artists a bit, no? So I thought about these questions, which is there anything or anyone that inspires you while you're doing your job? Henry?
Yeah. Okay. It's for me, since joining the space, the thing that has definitely stood out and inspires me every day are the people that are in this space. Like I cannot believe like how intelligent, passionate some of the people are who've kind of built some of these projects. And when I've got to meet them in person, I mean, it's remarkable, really. They do really inspire me to do my job as well as I can, and kind of try and really stay on the cutting edge of technology and what is possible and what's not possible. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of creative geniuses that are kind of around the DeFi space and crypto space. And I think like for me, you see I've seen at least this evolution where I was like exposed to Bitcoin really early on, and I got to kind of know the community there, and it had this very same ethos, I think, that DeFi has now, where it was a lot of kind of, you know, very creative, very smart people trying to create technology and do very interesting things. And that narrative, for me, at least for Bitcoin, has kind of moved on, and it's something different entirely. And then that kind of spun up in the early days of Ethereum, and I'm sure that's still on with Ethereum today. But specifically in DeFi, like, I see all of this incredible passion, a lot of extremely smart people building a lot of technology that they're ultimately trying to make it bigger than themselves. And yeah, so I get inspired by all of the people in the space for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I have to agree with Henry. Yeah, so my answer would be that the whole Ethereum community basically inspires me. Like, although it is, like, of course, inspiring community, but it is not without flaws, right? Like how many hacks and scandal we have gone through, and yet we're still here. So I think we are like a resilient, like, you know, enough, I would say, right? And also, for example, I think this is kind of like a space of opportunity as well. So look at the grassroots community initiative like Metacartel that has grown from 0 to, you know, an incredible size, and, like, you know, so many projects, supporters, fans in very few years. And
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. I think that something that is in common for everyone working in the space is that you never get bored. So let's go ahead. The last icebreaker question is this. If you were an animal, which one would be?
So it's probably because of coronavirus, but I was watching this documentary the other day about hyenas, and it turns out they have like the strongest social connection of any animal, and they have like really strong interpersonal relationships. So perhaps it's because of like socially distanced times, but I definitely feel like I'd be a hyena right now.
Okay.
Okay, I'd definitely be a cat because I have 2 cats and I spend so much time with them. So I would say cats are, like, at least my cats, I mean, they're gentle and they're affectionate, and you know, at the same time they're super curious and, you know, inquisitive and active and so on. So I just think, or maybe I would say, like, I want to be a cat. It's
okay,
like,
actually, when you have a pet, you want to be it, because, for example, I really love to be my dog.
Oh,
she's
God.
sleeping all the time, she's eating, she's running, she doesn't care, you know.
That's such a good life, right?
Yeah. Okay, so now we can go into the discussion, the main discussion, which, as I told in the beginning, will be around the importance of UX and design in the Web3, and how these two are some kind of weapons to foster the success of DeFi projects. So the first question will be for Lily, and it is very general, and it is, how do you think UX is fundamental for Web3 and in particular for DeFi project?
Yeah, I think UX is like, it is the fundamental, I would say. It's shouldn't be a feature, right? It should be the core, like, principle when you think about building an app. And also I have this supporting evidence. So from my small research I did earlier in 2019 on the user perception of Ethereum UX. And so the result was clear. So back then I was using like a simple method called best words scaling. So basically, I use it to calculate the relative preferences rather than absolute preferences from users' answers, so that we can realistically understand their opinions, right? So the result was quite, like, according to the survey, it was that according to users' perception, the most important reason that keep them from using product based on Web3 more often is you know, irrelevant features and complicated UX rather than speed and effort to KYC, or, you know, afraid of losing private keys, which was to me super surprising, right? Because the other, you know, the last 3, for example, are like the technical problems where there are, you know, people are really kind of focus on improving, but not so many people, or not enough people like talking about the UX itself, right? But anyway, I mean that research did like a while ago. So however, like now there's a problem of gas price. I would be quite like interested to also learn again. But I mean, even now, right, after this gas price is super high, there are still so many people buying into the network, right? So this is super clear that maybe technical problems is the least thing that they would care about.
So we have also like scientific evidences about it. Can I ask you a question about it? Which kind of sample did you take for this? I mean, which kind of people did you interview? Everyone, or the crypto users, or the like blockchain savvy? Who was the response?
So the respondents are around about, I think, 130, something like that. But I mean, it's not a big group, right? But it's also a sizable group. And most of them, I would say they're already crypto native. I'm pretty sure. Okay. I mean, I distributed also on Twitter, but also on, like from person to person, like from a friend of friend and so on. So there are also groups of people, at least like some of them, I don't know, like maybe 10% at least, who's like quite new to crypto. They know a little bit, but not very much. But I mean, it's still kind of yeah.
But I think that if you expand the percentage of respondents who are not crypto, the preference towards simple UX would be even more, because they don't even know what is a gas price and they don't know technicalities. So this would be even more relevant, and this is very interesting. Okay, then I will step a bit further, and I want to ask Harry this. So DeFi is kind of a new product, is a new concept, and is there some way in which DeFi is reshaping the UX and design paradigms, in a meaning that you can't use obviously the ideas and paradigms that you used for Web 2? So is it something that is challenging for you? How DeFi is reshaping these ideas, these paradigms?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like DeFi and crypto generally get a bit of a bad rap for UX and design, and rightly so, right? We're significantly far behind in terms of where we see Web 2 applications. But one thing I think that's really important to bear in mind is the fundamental change that goes when you go from centralized to decentralized essentially means almost all of the established or well-established patterns, or a lot of them from Web 2, are essentially out of the window, so that they don't apply to crypto, or at least perhaps they do, but you have the ability to rethink the way in which you implement them. So let's take like one of the most standard Web 2 patterns, right? It's like email and password to log into an application. But with DeFi, obviously that's gone, right? And if we look again at Web 2, like I personally think that the rate in which design is happening at DeFi, do I want it to go much faster? Of course I do. But I'm also very realistic, and I've spent time studying and researching kind of the different patterns and how they emerged in both Web 1 and Web 2 and the time they took. So if we look again at this login thing, like it took, like for example, now if I go and use a Web 2 application like Airbnb, I'll just click the first thing, like log in with Google, log in with Facebook, whichever one they give me the option to do, right? But if we look at that as a pattern, right, that now is almost pretty standard on any application that you use. But that really took 20 or 30 years for that to kind of get any traction until Facebook kind of adopted it and rolled it out. So, from the birth of the internet really to the creation of that pattern that we now all take for granted is this big leap up in UX for the whole internet. That took a long time to come around. So what I see today personally in DeFi is I see all of these different projects, different wallets, they're all innovating, and us included, on different ideas, trying out new and different ways. So I think that is like how DeFi is reshaping UX, is that you have this blank slate. So I think anything is really possible. And I don't know in 5 years' time, I couldn't say with a high degree of confidence, like it'll be this building block, and this building block, that will be the ones that will get mass adoption. But what I do know is, like, I was designing obviously Web 2 prior to jumping into DeFi, and it was, you know, you're really just doing the same thing but with different colors and different button shapes. It's like, here's the login form, here's this. And with DeFi, it really is like this kind of, with DeFi design, this experimental phase where it's like, hey, let's try and do this for the login. Let's try and do this or this. And yeah, I think we're seeing this kind of experimentation phase. And I think these patterns will just take a long time to get established. And yeah, so in that sense, I do think that DeFi is massively reshaping the way that we think about design and the way that we think about structuring products.
Yeah, and yeah, as you told, also now some Web 2 paradigms are not yet, you know, fixed. So I mean, also Web 2 is in continuous development, and Web 3 even more. So you have a lot of challenges in your job because you need to invent, no, from scratch, basically. So I want to ask you, Henry, which is the most, I mean, the best challenge, in your opinion, in your current role that you have faced so far?
Yeah, so easily the biggest challenge, I guess, for me, coming from Web 2 into DeFi, has been, over the last few years, the amount of holistic information you need to understand and know to really execute your job well. So in Web 2, again, we take for granted a lot of the problems, whether they be technical, economically incentivized ones, they've already been solved once you're at the design phase. So really, you're just dealing with how to get a user from A to B and help them solve their problem. But in DeFi, right, like, I think to be a good DeFi designer, product builder, engineer, you don't just need to know what it is that you'll be contributing. You need to understand, like, the economic incentives. You need to understand, like, the technical side of how things work. And I don't program personally, but I've done some deep dives into kind of understanding how a lot of that world works and spending time with the smart contract developers. So I think that the challenge is that you basically have to become not only like a great and relevant designer, but you also need to stay on top of, like, all of these other fields, from kind of understanding how markets work and just having this big holistic view. And that, again, goes back to the point I think I made originally about why I like the people in the space, is that you have so many people that you can learn from. Like, I occasionally tune into the Thursday governance calls, and it's incredible. Like, I love just sitting there listening to them on YouTube and just listening to people kind of go talk at length about different things. And then if I ever have a question, the amount of people I've reached out to who work in this space, who I would never know where to ask that question about, like, I don't know, like how debt works or something, or like some big economic question, and someone will spend like a long time explaining the ins and outs of stuff. So I think for me, that's the most challenging thing, and something that I think you're really suited to if you're passionate for the space, because you'll spend the time learning those things. Like, I don't see it as like a challenging and difficult thing. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy reading like books about things that fall outside of my, circle of comfort, and learning those things. But I think if you're passionate for the space, then you'll learn those things, really.
Yeah, and I also think that if you are not passionate, you can't work in this space, because I mean, in whichever area you work, you need to be informed, and you need to always learn something every day. I mean, it's a continuous learning, and this is the challenge, both the challenge and the fascinating thing of working in this space, I think. So next question is for Lily, and is related to the discussion, because it's do you think that working in the blockchain as a designer is harder than working as a designer in another space, like Web 2, or I mean fintech in general? Do you think that blockchain and DeFi is harder for you?
Okay, so my answer would be yes and no. So yes, because the products built on blockchain are, like Henry already mentioned, like kind of usually more complicated. And for designers, we need to constantly update ourselves, right? And also one of our goals is, I would say, to make users like use it like, you know, as less effortly as possible. And we also want them to understand the whole concept and perhaps, you know, like all these pros and cons, like with going through the app, right? So we try to protect their privacy, and we try to not hide like anything like weird, you know. Yeah, and no, also because basically I have a friend, like my very good friend. She's currently working for like some health tech applications, and it's also very, very difficult. So she's been, you know, doing all the tests because there are a lot of red tapes around it and so on and so forth. So she's been doing, I think, the test for like, I don't know, studying for like 2-3 months in a job already. So I think there are also some other fields which also require some sort of like very special knowledge and expertise also to work in. And I'm pretty sure also blockchain is one of that.
And and I think it's, again, if you are passionate of something, it's easier, you know, to I mean, it's also funny, so it's easy to work for something that you love. So as Henry said before, I would not enjoy to do marketing for fridges or, I don't know, trucks, because I don't care about trucks. And I think it's the same as a designer. I don't know if I'm wrong. What do you think, Henry?
Sorry, say that again. Yeah,
I mean, it's also, I mean, harder. It's easier or harder is also related to the way you enjoy your workspace, no? So if you love what you do and the space you are working in, it's easier, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. I think also, though, to bear in mind with that, I think I've seen a lot of people in this space also burn themselves out on that narrative. So it's like you end up spending so much and committing so much time and effort to these projects that you don't ever get any kind of you don't get any time to kind of step away and really reflect on the stuff that you've built. And yeah, I have also seen a lot of people just kind of work too hard in a sense and burn themselves out. So I think that's also important to bear in mind, is that I see this as a marathon, not a sprint. And if we really want this space to evolve the way we want to, I think we need to be here for the long run. So yeah.
Yeah, this is I agree completely. In Italy, this mentality is not existing. But fortunately, I don't work anymore for an Italian company. Okay, then another question is in my mind, it's very interesting because as I said before, I think about you guys as an artist, no? So I want to know, which is your mental process for when you receive a task, no? Design this. Do you have in mind your customer, or what is your mental process to start working and doing complete this task? We will start with Henry, and then I also want to hear about Lily.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on what the type of task is, but let's assume it's like a new type of product or like a new project we're working on. I was weirdly listening to this podcast that had Warren Buffett on it last night, and he was saying that he goes through all the company financials and does all of his analysis, comes up with a price of what he thinks the company should be, and then looks at the share price like right at the last thing, right? Which goes against how probably most people trade, is they'll look at the share price and then decide whether they're going to buy it, right? And I was thinking, because you obviously sent this question before, and I was thinking about like what I would say, and it's actually very similar. Like the one thing that I do before starting any design is I'll do two things. I'll firstly have to understand like a lot of the different stakeholder requirements. So like, what are the smart contract limitations, or what can we do there, and what considerations do we have there? So it's understanding firstly that, any legal implications, but then the third thing and most important is go and talk to the customers which problem we're going to solve for. So really understanding what their kind of problem is and what their pain point is and how we can address that. And then the third thing I'll do is I'll then just start sketching out different ideas, either in Figma or by hand. And then only once I've kind of gone through that process of understanding like the background information, talking to customers, and really I'm not structuring this in any particular way. Like I'll do it on chat with just various different people who I think would be stakeholders in these projects. Then the third thing I do, is then sketch out some different ideas and wireframe things. And then only at that point will I then go and look at the competitive landscape and decide how other people are treating this problem. Because I always think there's this like follow a leader mentality. It always happens in design. Like one person creates one thing and it has like a high degree of execution and it looks nice. Everyone is then drawn to that, like for what they should be doing themselves. And I think it leaves this big gap where it's like, you can actually experiment a lot more, but you need to not look at what someone else is doing before you kind of get your ideas out there first. So it's like, you really want to get your ideas, I think, but otherwise what you sort of have is like what someone else has done in the back of your head. And then that becomes like the easy thing to jump to when you're trying to create a solution. So when you're designing something, if I've seen someone else do something similar and I really like the design, that's just nagging at the back of my head. Whereas if I don't look at any of that stuff before, I'm just thinking about two things: the customer problem and kind of the requirements that go into what it is that we can build. And then I'm just free to kind of think on my own ideas. And oftentimes I've created stuff there that I think for me personally has been some of like the best design that I've ever done, is like in this like open space where I'm not really polluted with other kind of ideas. It's just me, the customer problem and the requirements.
Good. And you mentioned that, of course, you look around for inspiration by other projects, but my question is, I will ask it to Lily. When you look around for competitors or the market in general, do you only look at designs from the same, blockchain space, blockchain projects, or the Web3 projects, or in general, you can get inspiration also from completely different, for example, I don't know, a makeup website or something like this?
Yeah, me, right? I look beyond blockchain, definitely, because also I would also totally agree with Henry with all the process that he did. Basically, I also did kind of very, very similar. I would say like there are also a lot of things that we could learn from Web2, right? Also like good things and bad things that we could kind of, bring it over and think about it and improve it. So basically, I think I have maybe one point in that sense to add to Henry's like mental process was that I think in the recent time, I always like kind of think of a certain responsibility as a designer, right? Like when you basically design app which a lot of people use, or app where people trust to put their money in, I think it's very important to also consider also the impact, like both like positive and negative, also like to those users and, to the society and what would happen, right? And I think there are like some bad examples that we saw quite a lot in Web2, is that this UX that they call the dark pattern, right? So basically it's the kind of UX where it's coming from the book, I think, also kind of the whole paradigm from this book that this guy wrote called Steve Krug, I think. His book is called Don't Make Me Think, right? So basically, don't make me think. So it's a kind of like how the designer should design a UX where people don't actually think about, like, you can just do it instinctively, which is sometimes is also quite kind of, it's handy, right? It's easier to use and so on and so forth. But it's also taking away some certain level of realization that you need to also, not just giving your data, you also need to know what it is working behind, right? Or, how can you, like, I don't know, be more conscious about your decision, for example. And so I would say that I usually look like both like bad and good examples, and I try to apply it here and try to somehow make it better. But of course, it's also not just depending on me, right? As a designer, it's also depending on the technology, like underneath this, like, as well. So, yeah.
I think there's an interesting point as well there. Like when I think about inspiration for the space and where I draw it from, to me, like there's this area where it's like blockchain isn't like anything that's existed before, right? So the analogies that we can pull and the analoguses we can look at, they aren't relevant, I don't think, always. So if let's say I'm going to create, I don't know, a website for a coffee shop or something, the aesthetic, like there's a very clear aesthetic. You would have like some random person sipping a coffee outside a shop. Like a lot of that brand aesthetic is kind of built into the space that you're already in. And a lot of spaces are very well defined in the sense that like you would use certain like imagery, certain patterns, certain like textures to kind of indicate the space that you're in, right? But with blockchain, we're really not, we don't have that. And that's great. Like we have this like wide open field where I think like, again, exploration and experimentation is like really the driving thing. So I don't want someone to come to a DeFi project and look at it and go, oh, that looks like a bank, or like, oh, that looks like X, because it really is like this new thing. So when I draw, like when I'm looking for inspiration, when we're thinking on terms of brand and stuff, I tend to draw more inspiration from like the art world. I just posted a link to an illustrator who we really love at Maker. And there's actually this artist I really like, who's Cuban. It's like really into nature. But yeah, so really for me, it's about not being too rooted in any one kind of brand aesthetic and really thinking more exploratory about it. I think a lot of the AI projects that execute very well also do a good job of this. If you go to like OpenAI's website, for example, you don't arrive there and think, oh, this looks like X. You just go, this is weird.
You muted yourself, Maria.
Okay, so sorry, because I don't want to. Okay, so before going in the last part of this meetup, we have 2 questions from the audience. The first one, I mean, you guys can take them. The first one is, when designing for DeFi products, do you take inspiration from fintech products that are already doing a great job in UX? And this is from Nayat. I don't know who guys want to answer to this. I think maybe Harry, because I already asked about inspiration to Lily.
Yeah, for sure. So I think on the brand thing, as I mentioned, like we don't tend to take too much inspiration from fintech because we don't want to be overlaid with fintech. But for sure, design is not just about creating aesthetic, right? It's also about the actual practicalities of the UX and getting people through applications. So in that sense, yes, we take a lot of inspiration from fintech. And I think specifically one area that they do a good job in is like this hand-holding process. So once you're onboarding into a fintech, whether it be like a new bank or some like investment thing like Robinhood, they do a good job of 2 things. Firstly, being very direct and very clear about what it is that's happening to your money at all times. And then also where I think fintechs have created some open space, and Robinhood gets some shit for this, but I do quite like the way they do it, is they're not too pinned down to legacy terminology. So I think they change a lot of their terminology based on user feedback and user research to make it more understandable. A bank that I like in the UK, it's a fintech new bank, they rewrote their entire terms and conditions literally in plain English with emojis. And it sounds stupid, but the entire terms and conditions are on one page. It's like written as if you'd receive a text message or a WhatsApp from a friend. And it's incredible. Like I understand it all straight away. So I think I do draw inspiration from fintechs there, where you're kind of decoupled from legacy banks, the legacy institutions. The bank is called Monzo. See if I can find it.
Monzo, yeah.
Okay, can you type this thing there?
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah. So and the second question, and I want to ask you something else from this, also to Lily. Do you what do you think is a good UX in the fintech space? Can you mention one company that for you has a good UX?
Me?
Yeah.
I think Pool Together has good UX. You know, everyone can go there and use it. It's
Right,
quite
yeah.
complicated.
You can type in the chat as well. Good catch, good. And then another question from voter is this, and it's a very interesting question actually. So, isn't blockchain inherently user unfriendly? Because the user is 100% responsible for their own keys and their own money. And burdening the user with extra responsibility is the whole point. So how do you face this?
Yeah, I can answer this. I think, I mean, yes and no again, right? It's basically, of course, it's unfriendlier when you compare to the Web 2, but it's just also because, like Henry said, right, Web 2 is now super user friendly now. It just because it's this kind of like a fruit of all this experiment and development in the past, I don't know, 2 decades at least, right? 2.5 decades, for example. But then my question would be, that you define something good and something bad, in terms of like UX. This is like easy to use or not. It's like where does this mindset coming from, right? So basically, you have something that it exists before, teach you that it's okay 100% to rely on the company that build the app. Which is, I mean, it makes sense because all these like big institutions like banks or even governments or, a lot of all these also big apps and so on and so forth, they exist because there are a solution to fix this information asymmetry, right, between users and people, let's say, in the sense of you, let's say a bank, right? Like, I mean, I want to invest something, but I have like very limited amount of money. And then there are some companies that would like to get more money, like, like fund their companies, right? But like me as an individual person who has like a job and, have to take care of my cats and everything, how do I have enough time, to check all the choices available? So I, of course, relying on this intermediary to kind of help me, right? Also Facebook as well. Like I've been moving, like living in many countries, so I would like to keep in touch with friends, but who are those friends who like more relevant in the feed that I'm supposed to know, right? I have like about 1,000 friends, so I should see all of them happening at once, for example. So they kind of this due diligence for us. But then one thing that has gone wrong, right, it was because they're actually providing this service, which is, of course, very, very useful. But then now, since we kind of like rely on them 100%, they're like abusing that our trust, right? Because they're like, start doing something under the hood without our consent, selling our information we didn't even know, or, it's kind of opaque. They have this TNC, which would take me a lifetime to read all of them. So all these things, there are these kind of coming from this friendliness that we thought, right? That we thought, this is the standard, right? There's something that is going beyond it, especially if, make us, making more effort on doing something is considered unfriendly. But then I would say, like, taking extra responsibility for something that actually matters to you. Maybe the process could be slower. Maybe you have to do a few more clicks. But if it's kind of slow things down, it's actually not bad. I would have to say, like, one thing that I'm really kind of get a little bit scared these days are like, there's this, I think also on PayPal or several apps where you can do like one click and you can buy stuff. You can buy stuff like so easily online, right? Before I have to like kind of confirm maybe 2 times and stuff like that. But now I click somewhere and it's like, hey, confirm you already bought.
Amazon is like this. Amazon. Yeah. I always like, I'm there and they're like, yeah, maybe I will buy it. Click. Congrats, your product has been shipped.
Yeah. Hey, maybe can you just give me like 1 or 2 clicks more? Because I just, it happens to me like in the past months and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's very bad for shopaholic like me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but okay, thanks guys for your answers. There are two more questions, and then we will show your works live. So let's answer to these questions from Amy, both. One of them we already covered a bit, but maybe we can answer again. So what are some of the common UX patterns that more DeFi products should adopt? And what are some that you wish would go away? So I think Henry is the best person to answer, because he said before that we don't, since it's a new space, we don't have common patterns, but of course there will be some common common behavior in the designs. I don't know. What do you think, Henry?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity for more projects to get a lot of traction by really experimenting with different ways of doing stuff. And what I mean by that is the space is obviously, like I said, really early, right? So if we adopt on some of our projects some quite drastic UX changes, that might not necessarily be so great for our users, because we have like a decent chunk of them who are already used to doing things a certain way. So I think there's this opportunity for smaller projects to really kind of really experiment with like just crazy ideas and see how things work in production. So like when we're talking about logging into a DeFi app, like I think there's a lot that can be done there, a lot that can be kind of explored and experimented. And I think we'll all look back in like 5 years when some of these patterns are more established and they'll look obvious at the time. But I think now they don't look obvious going forward. So I think there is this opportunity to kind of innovate and just play around with kind of the stack. And I think some of the larger projects, us included, we're looking out into the ecosystem and seeing what is being developed and what is being worked on. But I think those changes and that kind of innovation will probably come from some of the grassroots projects out in the space. So I think what I would like to see is just more open exploration in the space on kind of design ideas and design patterns. And like, I mean, like weird stuff. Like I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yeah, like I know this isn't that weird, but I know Clio, one of the stablecoin projects, are doing something tethering your mobile phone to your mobile phone number to your wallet, so that becomes kind of your link there.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically just more exploration and experimentation.
Yeah, I mean, it's an open, as you told, is a white paper, and yeah, that there's something we don't even know if something is working well or something not, because the time stamp is too short, in my opinion.
I will say this though, I think in order to be successful in doing it, it's not the effort of a designer, really. It's a combination of designer, smart contract team, a marketing team, because you really need to understand like the full stack of like, how is someone going to interact with this? Like, what can we innovate on the back end? What can we innovate on the front end? How are we going to communicate this? What real world analyses can we pull in so that people understand what this pattern is? So I do think, yeah, it's a kind of multi-team approach to kind of solve some of these issues.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I mean, if the design is super cool, but then it doesn't, if I click, it doesn't work, then, I mean, this is not the success, the key for success. And next question is, okay, from Nayat. How can we bring mass adoption to DeFi if we don't take similar mental models that people currently have with Web 2? So I think, the question is, people just got used to Web 2 designs and UX. How can we, like, it's a very interesting question. How can we pretend people to, get into Web3 with a new, again, paradigms and mental approaches?
Yeah, I can take that. I think it's really possible, right? I think what we are discussing right now is perhaps the speed. I mean, if you use the exact same pattern, the thing that they already know, so of course, I would say the adoption will be faster. But on the other hand, when you really look around, I think the people who made up the society nowadays and 20 years ago, they are initially different, right? Also the mindset and everything, like now people travel so much more, they have more exposure, and we basically have like a record in the whole human civilization that the poverty is becoming less and less, right? Like there are like bigger like middle class people, which comes with all like better education, and people kind of like kind of know more, and especially all this they're more like digital literate, right? So I think actually DeFi is definitely gonna stay. But then of course there could be also the thing where we can kind of speed up the process, right? I mean, if we kind of involve some of the patterns that they know, I think it would make like kind of the barrier like a little bit lower, for example. But I don't think in order for us to kind of guarantee the mass adoption, then we have to go back to the Web 2 pattern. I don't think that's the case.
No.
So, yeah.
I agree. And as Henry said before, this is a marathon, and we need to keep running.
Good one.
It will be I mean, as it was for Web 2 and internet adoption, it will be the same here. I mean, it's not a 2 months process, but we will get to it. Okay, I think, guys, we can, before answering the last question by Amy, which is regarding tips, we can show, if you want to show us your, I mean, the work which you are most proud of. You can start, Lily.
Okay. Maybe I did actually super well prepare for this. Is it okay if I drop my website?
Okay, yeah.
Here.
So, but tell a few words about it. Like, this is your. Yeah, but please, the link. I mean.
Okay. What I'm doing, maybe in the past, I think the cool, like so all my clients, if you are here, so all of the projects that I have been working with were like super awesome, and I love all of them, right? I think one particular project was probably, so RVF website was also pretty cool, but perhaps like Ethereum.org in early 2019. It was like one of the project that I love very much. It's also, I would say, more or less like it's closer to my heart because it's also like involved a lot with the community, right? And that was kind of the big leap, like a big change from the last Ethereum.org like image identity website that has been there since like 2016, I think. And so the key was that at that time, so Ethereum launched, like kind of soft launched the new website, but then there are also a lot under the hood. Like, for example, they had this project of translating the documentation into many languages, right? So what I did was, so I contacted my friends who are crypto artists, like another 4 of them, and they basically, we come together and then, okay, maybe we could, like, each of us have our own version of, how the Ethereum identity should look like in this new era, and then we did that, and then we animate that, and then we also kind of have this a morph like effect to show like Ethereum written in so many languages. I think
I'm sharing the screen because you're not.
Okay. Oh my. Yeah. And I'm originally from Thailand, right? So it was, I don't know, like the first time that I wrote the word Ethereum in Thai, and it feels kind of very foreign to me. But on the other hand, I also feel like very close to me, because it's it's my native language. And I also ask people also on Twitter, like, okay, if you want your language to be included in this, please send. So there are also the guy from Serbia, also people from Russia that send, and we included them all. And I think it's pretty cool. to kind of like you have this collective ownership of this whole project somehow, right? Because we all somehow either work on, you know, the network, or we either, you know, wanted to invest in something, or there are so many use cases. And yeah, I think like just by presenting it in your own language, right? It's the very simple but yet powerful way to visualize, you know, this kind of ownership.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And here is the final design, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Like that one is in
And then here, guys, this is Lily's website. You can see all of her works. She also designed It Berlin website, TEDx, and so many other. And if you want, the link is right in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Harry, please share.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I think an interesting point to ponder is there's literally no better way to get feedback on your product than to put it live. And I think this is evident with the governance product that we put live. So when we put vote.makerdao.com live some years ago, maybe 18 months or 2 years ago now, there was a lot of assumptions going into that we were yet to unpack, and we didn't know how a lot of things were going to play out on the original governance interface. So some of the misconceptions that we had internally were firstly the rate at which the governance cycle would happen, and how frequent and how often things would get used. Obviously, the lack of responsiveness was an issue. And then one of probably the largest bits of feedback that we get on the governance product is people don't know where governance happens, right? And we weren't too sure either at the start, outside of some of the calls, specifically where governance would happen, right? And those areas have cropped up in several different locations. So we set to kind of address some of that feedback in updating governance. So the first thing we'll be launched, and this is not live yet, this is going to be going live in the next few months, is we're firstly creating a governance landing page, which does a couple of things. It will firstly point people to the different areas at which governance happens. So the forum, I think, probably emerged in the last 6 months, and perhaps new things emerge in the future where governance happens. So we wanted to create like a single entry point for governance. So if I go away for a week or 2 weeks, I can come back to this single entry point, and we'll change and enhance this as we go along. But I want to know kind of the snapshot of what's been going on, how is the system looking today, and then from there I can kind of jump off into the different layers of governance. So I can jump into the actual portal itself, or I could go and catch up on some of the forum posts, or I could listen to some of the recordings. And then one of the second issues we're wanting to address is, as I mentioned, about the governance cycle. So what we're noticing is there's a lot of polls happening at the moment in governance, and obviously the UX of that is not ideal. You essentially have to go in to each poll, vote, wait for the transaction to clear, and then start the process again. And sometimes there can be 10 plus polls happening at one time, right? So that's 10 things you have to do on an application that's already quite slow, and then 10 transactions you've got to wait for. And obviously at the moment that's a bit of a long time. So we're implementing batch voting, where you could essentially select all of the things that you would like to vote on, and then it's just one transaction at the end. And the smart contracts team, wow, and Josh have rebuilt a lot of the back end of this. So the live version is extremely quick. So to actually go through this process, to be able to submit your vote, I think it'll probably reduce it from, let's say it was like half an hour before, to probably 2 or 3 minutes. So that, but this is all I'm allowed to share from the project at the moment. But look out for that. We'll be launching that probably in the next few months.
Awesome.
Nice. That will be also good because one of our, our main goal now is to bootstrap the full decentralization, and this kind of design will help for sure for people to participate even more in. Harry disappeared, guys. Wait.
Yeah, I try to.
So even more in the voting process and in the governance. So it's super helpful. Okay. Last question, which is also our closing for today, is if you have, guys, any tips or I mean advice for anyone entering the space with your background. I mean, for like a fresh designer, which kind of resources would you recommend? If you have any tip or something like this. We can start with Lily and then Henry.
Okay, I think for new designers like coming into this Web3 space, I would say the best advice that I have received earlier in 2018 was that you have to be a user. You have to try to use all the different apps, really, right? And yeah, like I mean, it's not the actual like design advice, but I mean, as a designer, and if you're not a user in this complicated kind of app space, it's very difficult to go anywhere, because it's not just about how it looks, right? It's not just about, oh, it looks amazing or the shadow is right, but it's about like whether this works or not, whether this improves the experience or not, and you cannot know at all if you're not a user. If you use it one time, I think it's not the same as you use it like quite often, and then you become a user, and then exactly, oh my God, if I were in this position, I would do something.
Yeah. So how many wallets do you have installed on your?
A lot. I'm like,
you have a folder with wallets.
I'm actually a user of most products that I design. I mean,
of course, yeah.
Most. I just yeah, kind of.
Okay, thanks. And Harry, some tips?
Yeah, I would just follow on from what Lily said, and I think one thing that's really important is to just immerse yourself in the communities. I think if you're a designer, an aspiring designer, if you just immerse yourself in the different DeFi communities, there's always stuff to be done, right? So before I joined Maker, I was a community member at Maker, trying to understand how the protocol worked and trying to get up to speed with various different things. And that's how I got into the Maker project. I got in contact with someone who worked at the foundation, and we went back and forward, and I understood the project. I'd been participating and asking questions. But we see that like Maker's obviously a lot more established now than when I joined, but we see new projects almost popping up daily that I think have a lot of promise and are doing a lot of interesting things in DeFi. And the communities are big and they're vast, and that they're screaming for designers to join them. One of the designers at Maker who joined just after I did, it was his first design job, but he came to us. He'd drawn loads of different prototypes for Maker in his free time, just because he was passionate about it. He understood everything about the project and the protocol, and he just said, hey, is there anything I can do to help out? And we were like, wow, this is incredible. He's actually gone off and solved a lot of the kind of interesting problems and taken a stab at stuff. So we ended up hiring him, and he's still with us today. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for designers in the space just to immerse yourself in the communities that interest you in DeFi, and there's certainly plenty of them. And yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And also I would add something for everyone joining new to the space. It's don't get scared, because everything is amazing, and also the people surrounding in this space are super helpful, so you can ask everywhere. And I mean, don't get scared if you want to start. It seems very complicated, but it is. But you will never get bored. So it's
okay, +1.
Yeah. So I think, guys, we can close here. I want to really thank you for being, and if you want to share some resources in the chat, please do it, or reach me out. I will write a thank you email to the attendees. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and I want to also to thank everyone who participated, and really enjoy your hottest day in London.
It's too much.
I see you're already sweating.
I'm going to go buy some ice, and I'm getting in an ice bath after this. I think it's ridiculous.
and thank you again. And the recording will be available here at this week.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye.